This board workshop of the College of Rapids Board of Trustees, January 15th, 2022. Will come to order. Thank you. Please join me in salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any public comment? No. Okay. We'll begin with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered today is unceded territory of the Wiyot people who continue to live and thrive on this land today. It is surrounded by the traditional, ancestral, and present homeland of several indigenous nations, including the Hupa, Karuk, Matole, Talawa, Wailaki, and Yurok that make up Humboldt and Del Mar counties. So this morning we have no action items on our agenda. We will have food delivered around 11:30, and when we're not interrupting somebody, we'll break and get our food. And we're going to begin with our continued discussion of the redistricting options. And we have a new one, as you know, with Plan West Partners. So we welcome Colette and Jason again this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Jason.
Morning.
Hi, Colette.
All right. Well, Jason is going to share his screen again, and we're just going to go through kind of the intro redistricting slides and principles again, just for anyone new in the public watching. And then we'll go into reviewing the trustee options and new option that's going to be presented for the first time today. So with that, here is the redistricting timeline. So we had the first map consideration by the board on January 4th, and we received comments from the board, and we are coming back today for the second map consideration. And then we will have a final map adoption hearing at the next board meeting. And I should have put that date on here, but it'll be at the next board meeting, which the final map must be approved before the first day of March. So that's kind of our end goal moving forward. So just real quick, redistricting is when we redraw lines, redraw districts, or in this case, trustee areas, to be more even in population. And this is done as part of the decennial census process. So there's federal and state laws that guide redistricting, including the federal and California Voting Rights Act. And the traditional redistricting principles that really guide this process is that lines be contiguous and compact, that we identify and consider communities of interest when redrawing lines, that we look at bounding, making boundaries follow natural or man-made boundaries like roads, and that we really try to minimize voter shifts, and really preserve the core of existing election areas. And when we think of communities of interest, we're really thinking about looking at, potential neighborhood level or, community level, communities that have, similar economic and social interests. And so examples of this can be, common assets in the community like schools or commercial shopping areas, at the neighborhood level, looking at housing and employment. And so there's not a definitive data set here, but we, that this can be guided by many different interests or assets. So with that, just kind of as a summary, we are striving for, population balance with redrawing these trustee areas, and Jason will talk more about that. We do look at, looking at ethnic populations and trying to, the law says that, to look at a majority minority populations. And so we do look at that as a factor, but it's not the predominant factor when redrawing trustee areas or redistricting processes. And again, we look at, traditional criteria, drawing compact contiguous areas, looking at geography, topography, and respecting communities of interest. So this is kind of the broad overview and things that we look to when redistricting. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jason. He's going to talk more about the balancing of populations and then start going into the maps.
Great, thanks, Colette. So yeah, like as Colette said, I'm just gonna quickly review kind of where we're at, where we're going, and where we've made it so far. And basically, as Colette mentioned, the main objective here is to try to distribute the population equally across the trustee areas. And so we know people tend to move, people come, people go. And so at one time, when the trustee area population distribution may have been equal, there's a high chance within the last decade that people moved around enough to where they are not equally distributed. So really the first task was to kind of analyze the current trustee areas. And so what I did is I pulled in the newest 2020 census data and looked at the population across the current map. And as we see with the current trustee areas, our target goal for total deviation would be no more than 10%. And right now we can see that our spread is quite a bit more than that with the current trustee areas. So first objective is to try to look at these areas and do a little bit better job of distributing the population. So my first attempt, option one, was to try to maintain the current trustee areas the best I could, albeit, distributing the population much evenly. And so this is what I came up with, and we can see that we have less than a total deviation of 10%, looks like about what, 6.8% or so, so less than 7%. But one of the things that I kind of noticed, and Colette talked about, communities of interest, that trustee area 7 took up such a large expanse, going from Delnor all the way down to Southern Humboldt. To me, that's not necessarily reflective of what might engage a particular area or community of interest. So my first attempt at trying to break that up was in option 2. And we can see, again, our total deviation less than 10%. Trustee area 6 had a little bit less population, and trustee area 3 had a little bit more, but again, less than the total 10%. And when we showed this to you guys, there was a little bit of concern in a few areas. One was the board had interest in having more of a coastal trustee area that represented areas west of Fortuna and down, and then the McKinleyville area. And then the Eureka one was quite small. And so we took these notes, and what we did is we looked at the Board of Supervisors option. And although we can't necessarily match theirs exactly because they have a different amount of trustee areas, which would put a different target goal of population. I think theirs would be 26,000 or something. We did use that as sort of a tool to help guide us. And so option 3 is what we came up with. And you can see here, what is that, Trustee Area 2 does capture some of the coastal area. We did try to include Blue Lake and McKinleyville, and then the Eureka one did include a little bit bigger area. And I know at this scale it's hard to see those details, and so I did put these options on the Arcgis Online Map, and so hopefully the board has had time to look at those, but we can do that together right now. And so here's the map, and you can see on the left side we have all of the options. And right now I have trustee option 3 on. We have the county boundaries, so you can toggle those on and off. And the current trustee areas, I put them on as an outline on top just to sort of use those as a guide to where they once were and where they where our current options are. And a couple things we can do is right now I just have a simple base map on, but if we change that base map to say an image hybrid, as we zoom in, we can kind of see the roads and a little bit of the area imagery here, but this will give us a little bit better scale to see where these separations are. And so I'm just going to turn on the legend here. So we can see Trustee Area 1, Eureka. The one option I had, it was quite small. And so I took your guys' comments, and what I did with the help of Colette is we included sort of the 101 corridor, a lot of Old Town, over across the bay, and a little bit into Eureka. So that area is much larger. And then the McKinleyville is quite a bit larger as well, included Blue Lake all the way up to Big Lagoon and more of this coastal area, Patrick's Point, and McKinleyville. So McKinleyville no longer is separated. I think we had it at maybe School Road or something before. And then we also worked on this coastal area where Fortuna would be included more in the inland rural. We have Lolita, Ferndale, Humboldt Hill, Petrolia, etc., all the way down to the coastal areas. So we thought this was a little bit more reflective and considered the board's comments. So any questions about any of the options? Our latest option?
I have one question. I don't think it's any different on option 2 or option 3, but where is the southern line for the area 3, the Del Norte area?
That's probably the same. I don't think we changed those at all.
Oh,
And that has to do with just the population. In order to capture these, this pretty much has to be how it is just because of the population.
Right, but I just wanted to know kind of where that southern edge of that district is.
Oh, okay, the exact here. So let's look at, I'm not even sure. It's based on their precincts. So their precinct, they have a huge, the Del Norte County has crazy big precincts. And so that precinct line goes right straight through here. And so it looks like, well, we got the Del Norte Coast Redwood State Park, and then essentially just comes across here, but I'm not sure exactly. Let's look at a different base map and see if that helps us. I mean, it's pretty rural where it's actually splitting. Here's yeah, it's hard to see exactly where it is splitting, but
It looks like
that's some topography.
Though, and
Yeah, it's pretty rural. Rattlesnake Mountain. Yeah, it's hard to tell.
It's the precinct line. I got it.
Yeah, and I do not have their precincts up here, but if we clicked on their precincts or looked at them, you could see that that's where the precinct line goes. But essentially, I mean, Del Norte Coast, Redwood State Park, Crescent City includes all that. Let's try. Luckily, we got a ton of different base maps we can use, but yeah, if you're familiar with the area, Rattlesnake Mountain. All the way over.
Thank you. When I look at your population summary tables, it looks like option 1 gives us a kind of a range of deviations, a -4.3 and a 2.5. Option 2 gives us a -5.9 and a 3.5 and a 2.7.
Right.
And then option 3 gives us a -4.3 and a 3.5. So based on deviations alone, which of these options make the most sense for redistricting from that kind of perspective? Do you?
Well, they all comply with the federal laws saying that they need to be within a 10% total deviation. And so, you know, for instance, option 3, if we look at the table here, our total deviation would be 7.8, you know, looking at -4.3 to 3.5. So that's well under the 10%. And so really it's based on the census blocks that we're using to create these trustee areas that is our limiting factor in how much we can dissect or, you know, really refine these trustee areas. And so having, you know, an option at 7 and 7.8% is really pretty good. So I would say they're all pretty good. Here we have one that's a little bit higher, but 6. This one's a little bit closer to 10, but it still complies federal law. And then option 1 as well. We have what, -4.3, and the highest is 2.5, so it'd be 6.8. So option 1's probably our lowest. Option 2, second best, but they're all still within compliance. So I'd say at this point, it's probably more important to go based on how you feel the trustee areas represent those communities. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Trustee Biggin?
Thank you. I had a question on the chart for option 3 and some of the highlighted numbers. Was looking at trustee area 1, kind of in the middle where it says % of trustee and then it's 5.4. What does that mean, % of trustee?
So these are the ethnic breakdowns. And so this population right here of Asians, that's the amount of that particular population within the trustee area. So 1,261 people is 5.4% of the 23,463. So each of these % of trustees tells you what the ethnic breakdown is within that trustee area. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. That does make sense.
Okay.
I really love what you've done with option 3. It's just so creative and amazing.
Thanks. It was based on your guys' feedback, so thank you.
It is so perfect in terms of communities of interest. I mean, for me personally, I've only lived in Humboldt County for 50 years, but, but I do have a home in Shelter Cove as well as living in Hoopa, and just my experience in over those 50 years, this really feels good, this particular option.
Well, great, thank you. We were pretty happy with it as well.
Any comments or questions? It would be good to know I think today, if we, have a consensus, because at the February board meeting, we'll need to vote. Trustee Capini?
Yeah, I would like you to finish option 3 with the map like you were doing, all the areas. Walk us through like you were doing.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Jason, he'd like, if you can, on the web map, walk them through options 1 and 2 as well.
Oh, okay, sure. Absolutely.
And no, I just want option 3.
Oh, you do just
So
want
walk
to go through it again? Okay.
finish walking us through that.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, sure. So just turn on option 3 and then you want to kind of look at where the breakdown is.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can start with, so trustee area 1, and I'll put on the streets maps here, whatever. And we provided the link too, so that, once the meeting's over, the board, each of you can look at this yourselves and kind of zoom in and really start to sort of dissect it yourself too. So trustee area 1 is more of the Eureka, Old Town, and into the city. And one thing I noticed, I don't have the city limits up here, but it kind of follows some of the city limits. There is quite a bit of population concentration here, so this trustee area had to be pretty small, but we wanted to make it a little bit larger than it was before. So we took out some of the other areas of Eureka, such as Myrtletown and Cutton, and then included more of the bay and the peninsula. And then trustee area 2, we took those areas south and included, Pine Hill, Humboldt Hill, and then more of that coastal area that you guys were thought was pretty important to include. I think before trustee area 2, we had it kind of split off, which your comments made a lot of sense. This doesn't necessarily, coming into the eastern side of Eureka and all the way over the coast, didn't really make sense. So what we did is we removed that area from southeast Eureka and then brought in that population along the coast here, which I think most of us, as we're driving down the 101, we can sort of see this as a really similar area. So it does make sense. Trustee area 3 would be our North Del Norte, including Crescent City. Trustee area 4 would be our areas north of the bay here, including most of Arcata, Sunnybrae, Bayside. Trustee area 5, those areas north of the river, and then some of our rural and coastal areas, such as McKinleyville, Fieldbrook, and Blue Lake, and then up to and including West Haven and Trinidad, and up to the lagoons. And trustee area 6 would be more of our inland southern Humboldt areas, including Fortuna, Rio Dell, Myers Flat, down the avenue, Garberville.
And actually, can you go back up to Rio Dell?
Yeah, Rio Dell is actually on the coastal
Actually
side.
in area 2, so it's just Fortuna,
Right.
and Hydesville, and then it goes down the 101.
Yeah, unfortunately, we had to separate these out just because our population balance would have been a little off. So we had to include these to bring up the population a bit for the coastal area. And then the final one, 7, is more of our northern and inland areas. So going southern Del Norte, including communities of Oric, and then down over into a lot of the tribal areas, Wichipec, Hoopa, down the 96 corridor, over to Willow Creek, and then down to including Neeland and How far does that go? Yeah, Lone Star Junction. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, me as a trustee, I'd probably, be leaning towards this one as the best option. I was kind of intrigued with option 2, but I think, this does a better job with communities of interest.
Agreed.
See, Kelly?
It's a tough one though, right, Trustee Copini, because I think that Fortuna and Ferndale have a lot in common. So for me, both 2 and 3 are decent options. I think option 1 gives us the least amount of deviation, but it really doesn't make sense geographically.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm just trying to think about our communities, and Fortuna and Ferndale seem a lot more in common than Ferndale and Petrolia. But I don't know how to, it feels so fuzzy. I mean, I understand the population stuff seems hard science, but how do you figure
Yeah,
out?
well, I liked in this one that they included, Lolita and south of Eureka with Ferndale. And I could live with either one of them because, Ferndale, Fortuna, Eel River, you know, Valley and this and that, I could live with either one of them. I happen to like this one a little bit better, but, you know, that's just my opinion.
If I might remind everybody, the original districts were aligned with the high school districts. And so Ferndale has a separate high school district from Fortuna High School District, so they've always been, in the past, seen as separate districts and separate governing boards. And I know that Ferndale spills over into the Mattoll area in terms of the community and the agricultural, economic similarities too. So it makes sense to me to keep them separate.
Well, there was also, a lot of kids come from Atoll to go to Ferndale schools.
Yeah, we can see here the current trustee areas, and Fortuna and Ferndale are split.
I would just comment that, from the point of view of Del Norte County and Del Norte area, that either 2 or 3, to me, makes more sense in that you have, more of the county represented in one trustee area. I know we're not going to get the whole county in one trustee area. And I also like both 2 and 3 from the point of view of not making the one area go from, Del Norte to the end of the district. That really, obviously seems to me something that the change would be good. And I'm listening to everybody else in terms of Area 3 being, responding to the concerns at the last meeting and trying to, represent those. And they we're kind of bound by the numbers, so we don't get to, massage it every way that we want. Trustee Mullery, do you have any comment or?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I needed to miss the last meeting, so I'm playing a little bit of catch up here. Truth be told, I'm having a hard time seeing this, and I don't have the link. Which map is option 2 and which map is option 3? I mean, that's where I am right now. I'm having a hard time distinguishing between the 2 options. I don't know the numbers.
I'm going to put the link. I'm not sure if that was shared with everybody. trying to find the chat here.
Could you just tell me what number this is? You're all talking option 2 versus option 3, and I don't know what number I'm looking at.
Currently on the screen right now is option 3.
This is option 3, okay.
Yep.
That helps me. I know what we're talking about, we're talking numbers.
This
So
is option 3.
Could you quickly, warnings. Could you quickly show me, option 2 again?
Yep. There's option 2.
Oh, okay.
And with option 2, can you just zoom into kind of the Eureka just a little bit further in? So I think a big difference with option 2 obviously is the coastal, southern Humboldt, but then also Eureka, the comment we received on this option was Eureka was really small. It didn't include Old Town Eureka. It didn't include the peninsula. And so we really made some significant changes to that trustee area to include the, core part of Eureka. So, Old Town and the core of Eureka, like on H Street, and then including the peninsula. So it's quite a bit, it's a bit larger now, but I think it also represents that community better. And then moving up, the other comment we received for option 2 was that, Arcata and McKinleyville. So the purple one is Trustee Area 5. It kind of includes the majority of Arcata, but doesn't include like Sunnybray. So it's not all of Arcata. And then it went up, included Fieldbrook, but in portions of McKinleyville, but kind of split McKinleyville. So what we really did in the new option 3 is use the Mad River as the defining line between the 2 trustee areas. And so now Fieldbrook, McKinleyville, Blue Lake are in one trustee area, and then up towards Trinidad and Big Lagoon. So that whole 101 corridor going north. And then the Arcata trustee area is truly, Arcata. It includes Sunnybray and Bayside and Manila. So that's kind of the defining features. And so I think just based on feedback from the last meeting, we were able to, I think, incorporate the feedback in the comments and define the communities of interest a bit better in trustee area option 3.
Yeah.
Just do one quick follow-up, and again, I apologize I was unable to attend the last meeting. So speaking to my trustee colleagues, based on the comments you made at the last meeting, is option 3 that the planners have developed? Is that right, based on the comments?
Yes, that's correct.
It makes a lot of sense to me, frankly, option 3. And Trustee Kelly, is it your question that you're wondering if Fortuna should be part of Ferndale or Ferndale part of Fortuna?
I was just looking at the differences between option 2 and option 3 in terms of the similarities between Fortuna and Ferndale.
Right.
So, but Trustee Copini's comments about a lot of the kids from the coastal areas going to Ferndale makes a lot of sense, and possibly option 3 is the better option.
Thank you for that further explanation.
Of course.
So are there any other questions from trustees at this time? Not voting, it looks like option 3 has our support at this point. Okay. President Flamer, are Colette and Jason automatically coming to the Board of Trustees meeting in February, or is that whether we need them or not, or
We have not asked them to, but if there's consensus on 3,
we, okay.
so I will put that on the board for approval, plus the public comment on 3, and I will ask Colette and Jason to attend in case there's further questions.
I think that would be helpful. Maybe short, they may be there for only a short period, but I think
I agree.
would be better than our having a question that can't get answered.
I agree.
Trustee Mallory?
Yes, if I may ask, at the previous board meeting, were trustees Dorn and Robertson in attendance? So they provided this feedback as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so Colette and Jason, we want to thank you very much for all your work and for responding to questions and comments with option 3 successfully, I think. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Your feedback was incredibly helpful, so.
Really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
See you at
So
your,
trustees,
have a great day.
Thank you.
we will move to 1.3, organizational structure. Dr. Flamer, there was a question about this and changes, and so we asked you for.
I'm really not quite clear about what Trustee Dorn was asking at the last meeting, but I will just make some general comment that we are still moving forward on trying to stabilize the structure. My main concern right now is finding enough employees to fill vacant spots, especially in our business office. Right now we have Julia and Erica running the show, and we need some staff there. So we're still looking at our job descriptions and revising those and trying to entice more workers. I think that Trustee Dorn would have been asking the questions about what we're doing in HR. So we're going to start to search for the director of HR in about a month. And right now it's probably 50-50 and whether we'll find someone in the short term, because it's hard to find employees, number one, to come to Humboldt because of various reasons. But we are going to search again and remind the board that we've had 3 failed searches for HR, so we will continue that search.
And currently, are you overseeing HR? Or who is, right now it's you?
I am, but however, pieces of HR has been sent out, like, for example, Angelina's our Title IX officer.
Right.
For now. And I picked up some, as has Carrie Merritt and Julia.
Trustee Capini?
I think, do I have to have this on just with us?
I think because we're on Zoom as well.
I think at least my perception of what he was asking or his concerns, which at this time really isn't fair, was that the size of the administration versus the FTS. You know, and although we're trying to rebound, and from my perception, it seemed like he was a little bit worried about that as far as the administration maybe getting too big if the FTS don't come back. That's what I perceived that he kind of wanted, but we're in unprecedented time. I mean, it's pretty unfair to say, hey, at this point in time.
I can understand that concern.
Yeah.
But really what's paramount in my mind is balancing how many administrators we have versus faculty, but also we are about to go in our self-study for accreditation. And what we don't want to do is have the visiting team come in and say that we lack the administrative capacity to run the institution.
Right.
Regardless. And that is something that's forefront of my mind.
And right now, we're actually down a full vice president. with
Yes, we
student
are.
services.
But what we've done is divided that work into two separate administrators. So we have a dean who oversees part of it, and we also have an associate vice president that's also picking up part of it under instruction.
Right.
But the absolute number of general fund monies that we're putting out for these positions has gone down.
Right.
Because we're using other funds. And these are just two interim positions.
About interim positions, is there a timeline on that?
We have 2 to 3 years.
We have what, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what-
2 to 3 years for interim positions. I'm working on the 2-year limit because, again, I don't want to get so close to the accreditation visit that we're lacking administrative capacity by having too many interims.
Trustee Kelly, did you have a question?
I was just thinking about the HR issue and, a lot of these conferences, you hear from colleges, that are sharing resources with their state partners, their state college partners, and, in grant writing, of course, it's probably pretty easy, but I wonder if there would be any benefit to trying to share HR. Like HSU, but
Well, actually, we've been looking at that the last year. There are some parts that we've been able to collaborate with HSU, but also there's some parts that we just can't because we have two different institutions. And they can help in some regard on a temporary basis, but not in a long-term basis. That's the first thing I look at when something becomes vacant.
Trustee Mallory?
I'm going back to something you said earlier, and I guess it was in reference to concerns possibly Trustee Dorn might have raised at the last board meeting. The one thing that I would point out, and I'm sure we're all very well aware of this, is that colleges have a fixed cost, and that regardless of enrollment. So colleges need a president, and it doesn't matter if the enrollment is 5,000 FTEs or 25,000 FTEs. So invariably, smaller colleges may appear to have a heavier administrative load when you just look at FTEs, but it's simply because certain administrative positions are absolutely necessary regardless of FTEs. And, I'm sure everyone is well aware of that. It just occurred to me if this was something that Trustee Jordan was raising, looking at administration. And I'm not saying we shouldn't look at administrators compared to FTEs, but we just have to keep in mind there are certain FTEs, there are certain administrative costs, fixed costs that are absolutely necessary.
But also, we're trying to structure, if you will, not just on the current FTS that we have, but the current FTS that we're trying to build.
Right. Trustee Davis?
Thank you. My question is related to the HR dilemma that we're in, because it's, it's such an important position, especially now that we're having more and more openings, but in light of our EEO plan and our interest in building diverse faculty and staff structures, and I know that new guidelines have come out and new templates, they're looking for districts to start field testing some of their guidelines. It's a shame that we can't attract, someone up here because we're at a pivotal point in terms of addressing diversity and inclusion. We have so many.
Well, we are actually pushing that issue through all of our searches with our deans and vice presidents. So that's really the top of our minds as we search for new employees.
So we've had a couple of different people step into an interim director of HR, but that's really been temporary. I gather, because of the dilemma we're in, that there isn't anybody internally to grow into that, who would be able to do that at this point, who wants to do that at this point?
I have not been able to identify anyone at this point, so.
And is there anything particular about the HR position that makes it harder than some others to get somebody here?
Because it's so broad and so many guidelines, and the work is much heavier because you're not just worried about what you're doing at the institution, but the state guidelines and federal guidelines, and also all the Title IX issues that are raising even further. So it's hard to find someone who has that level of expertise or desire to move from where they are to CR to pick up all of that. But right now, it's not broken, because we have Tina Walland who's still helping me within that area. So things are still moving along. We'll have to find someone to lead that operation so the other VPs and myself can let go of it and have a more coordination going.
Right.
But right now, it's going well.
Because we do have a lot of positions being advertised right now.
We have a lot of vacant positions and not a lot of people applying for them. Even some of our faculty searches, we have some that have a lot of applications and some that are 0, 1, and 2.
So,
What do you attribute that to?
You know, it's hard to really pinpoint why. But some people just don't have an interest in the position. Some people just want not to work. Some people just don't want to come physically on campus to work. So I think folks have people have other options to really choose from. And we just have to figure out how we're going to do that.
It's true all over California, it's not just.
It is. It is.
Great resignation.
Yeah, the
There's a
great
great
resignation. At the workshop that's coming up, I think in spring, that the league's doing,
Yeah.
there's gonna be one whole topic on that. It's just such an issue throughout the state. Faculty is leaving, staff are leaving, administrators are leaving.
Yeah, I've been on the listserv, and I see a lot of vacant, both presidents and vice president positions that are out for the second or third searches. It's just hard to find people. We'll just have to rethink how we do business as an institution moving forward, knowing that our circumstances aren't going to change. Still going to have workers still going to have a lot of vacant positions. We just have to figure out how we are going to restructure to take advantage of what's available. The cabinet is talking about this on a weekly basis.
So the positions in the business office that you mentioned, are being advertised?
They have been advertised for quite a while.
Okay.
Yes, right now we pulled a few positions, restructured those job descriptions to make them more attractive and open the pool. Right now we'll just have to wait. I guess we don't have a lot of people that want to work on accounting or budgeting.
Any other questions? Well, I don't know how encouraging it is to know we're not the only ones, but it is important to keep that perspective in mind when, even in terms of accreditation, which is a way off, but we won't be the only ones trying to cover all the bases with the current circumstances for that purpose either. Not that that lets anybody off the hook, but
It doesn't, exactly. It doesn't.
we have to have an answer.
And the other thing that, and I've said this before, is when positions come to cabinet for approval, forefront of our mind is how much money we're spending on instruction, how much money we're spending on non-instruction. So make sure that we're not out of compliance with that particular law. So there are several things that we're trying to balance as we move forward.
Well, what is crazy, this is affecting the country as a whole. I mean, every sector. I mean, good paying vocations from, they say for every, and I'm talking, you know, six-figure money, potentially really good money, for every 5 people retiring, from electricians to whatever, plumbers, whatever, doesn't matter. There's only 2 people replacing them. And supply chain, everything is affected, every business. I mean, it's just amazing. I don't remember anything like this.
Well, and as we think about these issues, let's remember the folks that are staying and are holding the lines and doing the work. They're suffering burnout and all kinds of issues. We should keep that in mind as trustees.
We do.
Okay, well, it's hard to know even if we can even say post-pandemic, how some of those changes will last beyond that. And so I think people are thinking we can't just assume that at some point things go back to normal, which don't really even hear anybody talking about back to normal anymore.
What we talk at Cabinet is that things will not go back to what they used to be, but how do we restructure our work, knowing that this is gonna stay with us for years to come? It's a new, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to 1.4, discussion of student satisfaction survey results. And Dr. Angelina Hill, we're very glad to see you here.
Thank you for having me. You can see the, okay.
Yep.
You can see it too. Okay. So the Noel Levitt Student Satisfaction Inventory, and I'm assuming you've looked it over, but we've administered it 5 times in the past 10 years. So we have done it consistently, and it's a pretty lengthy survey. We do end up incentivizing students to take it. It's all online, and students are asked to rate how important they think different aspects of the institution are, along with how satisfied they are. For most of the questions, there's a few questions that differ, and there's a few that we locally developed ourselves. But at any rate, what they do, so students are answering all these questions on a 7-point scale, and then they lump a bunch of questions with similar themes together into scales, and then you can compare importance to satisfaction, and you can compare our institution to the average of a national group. And that group it's all 2-year institutions that are, fairly similar to us, but not all California. Some California colleges are included, but it is national. And they took the survey within the same time frame, so that is controlled for as well. And so what we do every time we administer it is we, show discuss, analyze the results of the various constituency groups. And in the past, there are some specific actions that we took based on the results. So we were seeing, for example, that transfer requirements and counselor's knowledge of transfer requirements was coming up as an issue. And so we had our lead transfer counselor gave a series of presentations and walkthroughs with counselors and advisors around transfer requirements. So we were really focused on that and saw that improve in future administrations. Another thing that we focused on was payment plans, so that we were seeing, not only in this survey, but in some other surveys, that there were issues with, when things were due, how much was due, how payment plans were being broken down. So we got the business office together with student services, and they totally restructured that, and we saw some improvement here. You can see that in terms of the scales and the items themselves, so overall, our students give pretty high ratings to the satisfaction with these various aspects of the college compared to the other groups, and we have a lot of strengths that get identified in each administration, and it seems like our staff, our employees showing care for students as individuals, and then responsiveness to diverse populations. It was great to see that is emerging with really high satisfaction. So that seems like a continued strength in academics, strength in faculty expertise. But where we continue to see issues is, sorry, I'm going to go down to the trends here, is program, so knowledge about program requirements. It's more around students registering, knowing what to register for, help with their educational goals, and this comes up, and we've tried to do different things to address this in the past. So we tried to see where the bottlenecks are for registration and add additional sections, add online options. We have created a plan that's put online that shows when each course is going to be offered over the semesters, because we're seeing some complaints about students, expecting something to be offered every year, and then it wasn't. So we tried to address that, and we know that the counselors use that to help guide students. So we're a little bit concerned about the registering for classes with few conflicts, that is emerging as a challenge, or still a challenge, and so we're trying to figure out, some folks think that might mean that, it's not necessarily that the class is available when they want it, but maybe it's having conflicts because of prerequisites, or, so we're working with enrollment services, and they're administering more in-depth survey of students to figure out, we just need more information about what some of these challenges mean, because we don't know how to act on it with this level of generality. So we're trying to get more information. Happy to answer questions you have about the survey.
I had a question. One question was, so the 2021 survey, when was that administered?
In the spring semester, I don't know exactly when in the spring semester.
Well, that's okay. But spring 2021, we were still all online.
We were predominantly online, yes.
And in the midst of quite a transition, so I don't want to excuse something that needs to be looked at, but I just think it's really important to know that all of this was embedded in trying to deal with that. On the challenges emerging, faculty provide timely feedback about student progress in a course. Do we still have some early alert system? Okay, which is meant to have faculty identify students who are not doing well somewhat early in the course.
Correct.
Correct. So I can see, again, I don't know, But it wasn't new, last three administrations, it wasn't new to the pandemic to have that show up as a question.
No, I think that and again, we kind of use this survey alongside, a bunch of other surveys and input that we get. And I think as more and more faculty have started using Canvas, students are having different expectations about, wanting to always pretty much immediately see what their grades are in Canvas. And so we've seen higher expectations as we went from, even just 5 years ago, there wasn't a majority necessarily of faculty using Canvas, so had a big impact.
Trustee Kelly?
You mentioned that when you get the results, you discuss them with constituency groups, and I'm wondering if that included students as well.
No, and actually when we get to the employment satisfaction inventory, that comes up as an issue. We do in terms of we survey them in further detail to try to figure out, what's going on. And like I spoke with Aaliyah Duffy yesterday about she's had interviews with students recently, and so we're trying to glean what we can from her interviews in terms of these results.
My other question, if I may, is what impact has the Guided Pathways program had for academic advising here? Has it improved it? I'm wondering if it's had any.
So what our counselors did, it was a direct Guided Pathways initiative. They worked with each academic program to try to develop a suggested course sequence for students to put into the catalog, so that we have those now for the career technical programs, but we don't have them for any of the liberal arts programs. And so the counselors work really closely with the faculty to develop those. I think that they're in the process of being added. They also, counselors and advisors started having an office location and office hours in the department instead of just being held here, so that they could get better relationship with faculty there and what's going on and attending their division meetings. So that was part of the Guided Pathways initiative. One of the things that the counselors really want, I think everybody wants, is to complete the development of meta majors. I think that would help. But I don't know exactly where we're at with that. It's this process, but they haven't been rolled out yet.
Do you happen to know the breakdown of folks who feel like academic advising is not knowledgeable of program requirements between the liberal arts programs versus the career and technical?
I don't know.
Trustee Capini?
I see in recent years we've improved on that class scheduling for convenience for students. Do you attribute that to more online options?
I think so. I also watched the deans try to collaborate more with each other so that they weren't offering classes that met a specific GE pattern that overlap so much. So, in the humanities or in science and social science, they're offering things that might, overlap, and they just weren't really talking to each other as much. So I think that has had, also helped that, but the online certainly makes it easier.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great that they communicate and work together.
I would think, Trustee Kelly's already mentioned Guided Pathways, but the emphasis in the Ed Master Plan in terms of collaboration and coordination with Humboldt, and in terms of continuing to strengthen the guide pathways and the continued structuring of those pathways and degrees really should help make a difference the way forward.
I think we've had some success. So the ones I'm familiar with was, we have a lot of psychology majors, and there was an issue with the way that our program articulated to theirs, and so the faculty got together and from both institutions and worked out an agreement that they sent to the registrar at HSU. There was an issue with music, and our music faculty was able to help with that. And so they changed the system that they use at HSU that keeps the articulation information. And so it got kind of messy for a while, but I think it's much better now.
Any other, Trustee Bagan?
I do think of another question. There's some legislation moving towards common course numbering. That help or make it more difficult?
So before I came here, I was in the Nevada system, and one of my roles early on was implementing common course numbering when they first put it in place in that system. And it makes it much easier for students. I think it's really good for students, but within that system, which doesn't have very many, there's 2, 4 years, and 2 years, but it's not a very big system. It was incredibly difficult to implement. So if we can do it, I would think it would take a really long time to put in place. But I think what would be helpful is, and I know it's kind of controversial, but they're proposing moving to one GE pattern for CSU and UC. And I know that, and Trustee Matthews, I'm sure you know all about this, but the fact that we have the 3 GE patterns and students sometimes don't know, which one to do, and that can be difficult for them.
Just on the course numbering, wasn't there a law passed about that? But what's happening with trying to actually implement it? It's been talked about for so long.
Funding, and now to the government, and the budget is to allocate more funds to research and getting it done.
Trustee Capini?
Yeah, well, why would that be controversial? It seems like it would be a wise thing to do.
The common course numbering or the GE pattern?
The GE.
Oh, because it would eliminate some requirements in our system that would result in probably loss of faculty in those areas.
We got other faculty.
I mean, the common course numbering is, you need to really get faculty across institutions to agree on, how many units should a class be, and there was a lot of disagreement that I watched take place, but it would be great for students.
I would assume it means there has to be even more uniformity between a class at one school and a class at another, or a class in one system and a class in another, and it's hard to get it close enough to get articulation now, let alone when you are actually saying this is the same course. And your course has to look like this course. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you. And we will move on to the employee satisfaction survey results.
So the employee satisfaction survey is a little bit, it's quite a different structure There are questions around planning and priorities that the institution should have, as well as some general satisfaction questions. And we have administered this more than once, but we haven't administered it as regularly as the student survey. The last time that we administered the employee satisfaction survey, it was sort of interesting. One of the lower satisfaction items that really stood out at the time was around compensation, and that was after salary cuts and just before salary restoration, and so we didn't see that this time. That has corrected itself, and the lower rated, sorry, I'm way down at the bottom. The lower rated items on this survey had to do with supervisors. Let's see here. My supervisor helps me improve my job performance, and my department has written up-to-date objectives. So those were low, and I think part of the issue with the supervisor helps me improve my job performance, I think it has to do with our administrative structure. So we have associate deans that I think really help part-time faculty. The big part of their job description is to kind of mentor the part-timers, but I don't think that the part-time employees see the associate deans as their supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
They see their dean as their supervisor. So I don't know how much that contributes to it. And then the department having written up-to-date objectives, I'm not sure what that is about, although I can say it didn't get a terribly high importance rating. But I will be speaking with Dean's Council about, and various departments about more information about what they think might help address those issues. The biggest issue that I think came out of this survey that I think is on your radar already. Sorry, I didn't get to. This is on your radar, and if you have any suggestions. So here in this table, you see a rating of 1 means that group did not have enough involvement in decision making. 3 is just the right amount, and a 5 is too much. And so mostly for CR, you see we're close to 3. You know, the senior administrators got the highest, which is not surprising. It's still a bit lower than the comparison group. But the students was much lower. So 2, about a 2, and then alumni and staff were also lower. And so the issue that I've seen with the students is we'll get a student placed on a committee, and they will either never show up or they'll show up once or twice and then they stop showing up. So we have a very difficult time getting student involvement. I don't think it's for lack of trying, but I think we need to come up with ways of incentivizing them to attend, because just asking them to attend isn't enough.
May I add something to that, Angela, if I can, if I may? This issue about getting students to be more involved came up at a workshop yesterday, Flex Activity. And so I put on the agenda for cabinet is talking about how do we compensate students for their time and their effort on each committee. seeing if we can get more involved in that regard. Because it's what the student says, that we pay employees to serve on committees, it's part of their job. But we ask students to serve for free, and sometimes that is an issue. So we're talking about that.
Hey, Mallory?
One approach, President Flynn, that I'm somewhat aware of for student involvement, which has been a problem for many colleges and universities for many, many, many years, rather than compensation, is to develop some type of leadership curriculum. And I'm sure you're aware of this, as students are on a significant committee, you know, where time is expended. It could be, you know, maybe one credit union, it could be minimal, but, you know, not trying to equate credit union to compensation, but it's as if that the student recognizes that their work is being valued, and, you know, at the end of all this, they may be able to get some type of leadership certificate that they can put on.
Thank you.
Trustee Kelly?
I was, like, a long time went, so I won't go there, but I had a couple of other questions. So, do you have any thoughts about why we've gotten such a low response rate from associate faculty?
Probably just because they don't check their email as much, or, I mean, we do have a bit of associate faculty who, you know, they work other jobs, and they're just, you know, not as entrenched in the community as full-timers and staff.
I appreciated your trending SWOT analysis for the student survey. Wondering, were we missing it from the employee survey just because we haven't done it as frequently? That would be a nice thing to have, I think, in the future.
So would you say that if we went back to page 2, figure how far, so it looks as though, generally speaking, the employees are okay with where we're going? Is that what that overall number looks like, 3.92 versus the comparison mean at 3.84? So overall, employees seem to be okay with the institution, but drilling down, what would you say the top 5 things that the institution could focus on, Angelina, to boost numbers?
Well, I think, just in terms of satisfaction, I mean, the lowest ones, there are, it seems like this supervisor helping me with my job performance, and then there were some questions, again, related more to professional development that had lower satisfaction, but mostly all of the satisfaction means were higher than the comparison group. So there's nothing that kind of glaringly there's a big issue.
Okay, because I asked because of the follow-up with what Trustee Kelly referred to as since we're having such a hard time getting new employees to join the institution, what do we have to do to help the people who are still here to feel more invested, to feel more connected? So I'll be focused on that. So if you can help me figure that out, I'd greatly appreciate it.
But one other question I have is related to the high percentage of folks 1 to 5 years who submitted the survey. So I'm wondering if that is a turnover situation, or if we kind of have this, there was so much of retirement focus of folks leaving, and I'm imagining maybe this group is part of that, but with such a high percentage of 1 to 5 years, I think I wonder about turnover, and that would be something to look at, like for employee satisfaction. If people are turning over all the time, then there's something that we didn't capture in the survey, maybe.
And because there was such a large gap between the first time that we did deploy the survey and this time, what do you think we should target for the next employee satisfaction survey? Is it every 5 years, every 3 years we should be focused on?
We've typically surveyed the students every 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
So I'd say 2 years.
Take a penny.
Given with the supervisors, you know, we are, I don't know how to put this, but we're creatures of face-to-face interaction. And over the last couple of years, I mean, that would be very human to, these are just comments, human to think that you weren't, I mean, you don't have that personal contact nearly as much, you know, with your supervisor to feel supported or whatever. It's either probably through an email or whatever the means over this last couple of years. So, you know, that would be really hard to be a supervisor. Yeah, you can't be hands-on, that interpersonal interaction.
Yeah, and there was concern, even before the pandemic, there was, you know, more and more classes being taught online with supervisors. At the time, I think were mostly all had been face-to-face instructors and hadn't taught online. So luckily, before the pandemic, the deans had all taken that intensive online instructor training. So that was very fortunate as they were helping everybody convert to online, and I think we were pretty successful compared to a lot of other institutions.
And if we can also go to page 3, because this is what I'm about to point out. It points to what Vice President Biggin was referring to. The second sentence under institutional goals, the only goal that was rated significantly more important to our employees is DEI type of issues. And I thought that was pretty telling, that our employees want us to be more diverse. So that was a good line, so thank you.
Trustee Kelly?
And I think that the administration has done a good job of leveraging consultants and programs that can kind of assist, because I'm imagining that even taking the time to fill out a survey is extra work for an associate faculty that has multiple jobs. Having a meeting with a supervisor that would help the associate faculty feel better is extra time that they don't have, you know, and so there's this weird, you have to invest time to improve or to fix things at such stressful times, and I'm wondering if some of these situations, it sounds like we're doing great, so I don't know how much there's to fix, but you know, maybe some of these areas being able to leverage outside help for these point in time to improve a situation, especially if we have 1 to 5 year employees, so many of them, you know, it might make sense for, and because I don't know where the dissatisfaction might be, it's hard to what that looks like, but like you did with the DEI stuff, I think was a great example. But maybe there's something around coaching or performance improvement or something that we just don't have the capability of implementing, but maybe an outside consultant. I will say, as a coach myself, a lot of people are looking for coaching. And especially as we try to be more resilient and grow our own, folks who are lacking, you know, a variety of skills that maybe our institution isn't capable of providing all the time for job training for those individuals, and leveraging outsiders is useful.
I have a question that I don't consider critical, but I'm curious. On the involvement in planning and decision-making, how involved are alumni? And other than in fundraising, what involvement of alumni are we looking for, or are we measuring against? but not really clear on what, fundraising isn't obvious, but,
We actually don't. We don't do a lot of trying to get feedback from alumni, except, for example, when we're looking at when we looked at bringing football back, or when we're looking at bringing wrestling on. So we did actually reach back and talk to former CR folks to ask their opinion.
right,
But I think with this question, I translated that to mean how well are we getting our foundation involved?
well, that's why I said fundraising. I see alumni involvement there as, I mean, I understand what that would be. And I would understand on specific advisory groups or projects like you're talking about, where alumni involvement in terms of building community support, I just was thinking in terms of, you don't have alumni on committees, you don't have, I just wasn't clear. It's not a very big deal.
A few years ago, it's been a little bit ago, but we reached out to we were thinking of them as graduates, but we reached out to alumni to see who had transferred to HSU to get their experience about how that went. And it was kind of interesting. We ended up getting information mostly from business majors, because we have so many business majors, and for some reason that was the bulk of the respondents. But we do completer surveys, but yeah, we don't really think of them as alumni.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a discussion from the foundation board, and you might have been a part of that as well, where they were discussing the history, and there seemed to be a lot more alumni and community involvement in organizing some of these fundraisers for the foundation in times past that had kind of changed and evolved, naturally, like so many of these organizations that have stopped holding these big volunteer-driven galas and things like that. But I wonder if there isn't opportunity for more pairing programs with students, with alumni, more potential for pairing alumni with even some faculty efforts that could benefit from volunteer assistance, but afforded or the faculty are tapped, maybe. But I don't know. It sounds like it was a different era, and we just kind of evolved to a different place where people maybe don't have as much ability to participate in that stuff.
Trustee Capini?
Yeah, we don't have to always think of alumni as involved with sports or whatever. That's the common, that we kind of default to that because it's, pretty easy fundraisers. But it's like a nursing program, what these students did beyond, how did they impact lives? I mean, we could do fundraising there. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, if we want to, reach out or someone wants to grab that, because those are inspirational stories.
Anything further on the, this one? So you're thinking we might do this again sooner rather than later?
Actually,
What we
I'm
have?
going to take Angelina's lead and say that we're going to do this in 2 years. It would be nice to have a shorter comparison group versus 10-year span, so we can better plan.
I wonder how our data compares with employee satisfaction at our CSU neighbors. I know it's apples to oranges maybe, right, but I think especially associate faculty probably work.
A significant number, actually.
Huh?
Quite a few of our part-time faculty are also part-time at HSU.
Okay, we don't have food yet.
I think I just heard it delivered, actually.
Oh, it is here? Sorry. So this would be a good time then to take a break and get some food, and then we will get back to 1.6 on our agenda. Okay, so we will resume our discussion. And next on our agenda is 1.6, student enrollment and success data. Dr. Hill again, thank you.
So I'm going to Here we go. So I'm going to be walking you through the MIS data mart, and this is one of the most comprehensive data marts that I think exists in the nation. Probably has more institutions contributing in higher ed than anywhere, and it's a really extensive process to get the data into this warehouse. We have probably about a dozen data owners who own a file, and data gets uploaded multiple times throughout each semester or throughout the year. And there are a series of checks that are done on the data before it gets submitted to the warehouse. And so it's not uncommon to, when we first upload the data into the system, to get hundreds of errors back that have to be cleaned up by the various departments. But we always, end up with successful submissions, and the data at this point has really high data integrity. And the Chancellor's Office just keeps adding additional tables. So in recent years, they've added an incarcerated students table. They're adding data about credit for prior learning in the near future. So they just keep making it more robust. Probably the easiest way for you to get to it is under faculty and staff resources. If you go to the IR website, and it's here under resources on the side here. So this is what it looks like, and if you can't see this well, just let me know and I'll blow it up some more. But it has a series of different types of reports. So the students is about, it's going to be counts of students in different categories, and for mostly all of these, you can break them down by some basic demographic types. So there's student courses, student services, and I'm just going to walk you through some examples of what some of these look like. So under students, and they all look the same when you go into a given report. So I'm going to go into day evening status. So they all look like this, and you can get statewide averages, which could be a nice comparison. Or for us, it doesn't matter if you do a district or a college search, it'll be the same. So I'm going to run it here. And I'm going to skip fall. I'm going to go back pre-pandemic so that we don't get into the all online here. View the report, and here it is. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Which one did you put on there? I got fall 2019.
This day evening status summary report.
Yeah, so this gives us day, evening, and you can see we had 16%, 16.5% evening classes. And if I go ahead and we could compare that to statewide to see, are we kind of offering less or more evening classes. Now, it's kind of interesting, I'm gonna disaggregate by gender. Okay. So now I can see that in the day classes, predominantly female, and in the evening classes, you have more males. So getting difference there. And then I'm gonna disaggregate by age. And for day, now you can see that you've got the majority of students in the day classes in the between 19 to 24 or 29 range, clustering in the younger. And then if I look at evening, you can see kind of what you expect. You're getting more in the older age groups in the evening than the much younger students. So it probably confirms what you would think, that you're not having as many traditional students, age students in evening classes. Okay. So now I'm going to go enrollment status. I'm not going to go through all these. I'm just going to show you a few of the different types of reports. So, so enrollment status tells you if the student is new or continuing. Yeah, I've added a couple terms so that you can see. You can compare. So we have first-time students made up 19%, body in fall 19, and that dropped quite a bit in fall 2020. So in moving into the pandemic, we lost new students coming to us for the first time. Yeah, so yeah, so if we do gender, okay, so now.
Angelina, would you mind putting up fall of 21 with that whole comparison?
I don't.
Or can you do 3 terms, or can you only do 2?
Well, I don't think the data's in there yet.
Ah, okay,
For
got it.
21.
All right.
Because that just, I don't think that we've submitted, that's been processed yet.
Okay.
I tried it and it didn't.
Okay.
So for gender now, for first time, so we used to get more first-time males, and I did go back and look at that, and that is a pretty consistent trend. We have more females overall at the college, but we would get more traditional male students. And in the pandemic, and this is even more so this fall, we have far fewer males at college, and in this first-time student group, it's dropped quite a bit.
Now, would you have made that same assumption? Would you have made that assumption? If, for example, some of my colleagues, CEO colleagues, have said that they're seeing more females in college versus males now, but they're surprised at that number because they had thought that it'd be more males than females, because females traditionally either staying home with children, et cetera, et cetera. So curious to see what 21 would look like. Do you have a feeling about what we would see and the reasons why, do you think?
Well, I think, so before the pandemic, we were trending to having more females overall in college, so that's been an ongoing trend for quite a while now. I think that if you compare even back like 50 years ago, we're getting more lopsided towards females. And we were, one of the things that I'm not sure of is we used to see a lot higher percentage of students, female students in online classes. So I don't know if part of it is that males just aren't as interested in taking online classes as females. But what I've been researching, apparently there's a lot of men, and especially younger men in the pandemic, who have felt a sense of responsibility to get into the workforce, even if it wasn't in very high-paying jobs, but just to secure, for that security right away, and don't feel comfortable delaying higher education. And for whatever reason, that is what I'm seeing cited most in terms of this. And our student body also is getting a little bit older now in the pandemic too, which is probably, you know, we're seeing fewer first-time students coming in. So I'm gonna now move from the Students tab. I'm gonna go over to Student Services. The Courses tab, it basically gives you all the curriculum elements of a course. So you can compare and see, like, oh, how many sections of, you know, literature are they offering at other schools, or are we, you know, you could try to see if, you know, we're unique in terms of some of the courses that we offer. But so in terms of student services, I thought you might find this interesting. I'm going to go to the DSPS tab here, and we'll just do the statewide first. So sometimes it'll let you do an annual search and go before pandemic. $19.20. And so here is for the statewide, it's giving you the number of students who fall into different disability categories here. So the highest is learning disability, 25, and then psychological disability at 21%. And very little English in here. Okay, so learning disabled is the highest. So now I'm going to go to Redwoods. What you're going to see has been a consistent trend for many years now.
You're doing annual and then
1920?
yeah, okay. It's just telling me, well, it might be down at the bottom. Scroll down.
Is that working?
It works for everything else.
So for Redwoods, we tend to have always the highest, you got it, it works? Okay. Psychological disabilities is always our highest, most frequent disability. And if I break this down, I can break this down by age group. It tends more towards, older age groups and, more towards females too. It gets really messy if I just aggregate this many categories, but,
Students self-identify?
Do the students self-identify, or is there some formal assessment done?
there's a DSPS does an assessment. Okay, so now, probably the most important tab for you, that's the outcomes. So unfortunately, I don't want you to spend too much time poking around in these student success metrics or student success scorecards. They actually have stopped updating these a while back. So I think the most recent data in there is 14, 15. So I think because the chancellor moved from being very focused on the student success scorecard to now the vision for success, they have just kind of gone away from populating these anymore. But they do populate. We rely quite a bit on the completion metrics here, and I'm going to show you the retention success rates. Okay, so you could pick a specific ops code. So these are codes that get put in the curriculum document that indicate what category this would fall into. So if you're just interested in English or math or a particular area, you can select that. I'm going to just select all. And then I'm going to select all instructional methods. So that's where if you want to just look at distance education, online or face-to-face. So I'm going to get rid of basic skills. I'm going to get rid of some of these so that it's not so messy. Right now it just scrolls on and on to the right. Okay, so now we're just looking at credit classes. So you really have to pay attention to the headings because it'll, puts out a lot of information at first. And so this is your online classes here, and then face-to-face in the next row. And so for success, you can see here, you can see that gap in success with online courses being lower. And that's commonly seen in most institutions. We're pretty similar to the gap that exists statewide. Also, and this gets a little tricky, but you can go to the advanced layout here. And here, I would probably say don't mess around with this, but you can. And let's see here. So we could do instructional method. I can get rid of a lot of these and just keep online and face-to-face. And then I could just keep credit here. And in theory, you can, like, I could take this and move it over here, kind of lay it out the way you want, but it's not always do these actually move around or work, so it's kind of complicated. So I would say stick with the simple layout is better. And then a lot of times what you can do is just export it, the table, to Excel up here, which I doubt I would wouldn't have a need to do that, but you can get all the raw data. So I find the data mart the most helpful when I want to get a comparison with another college or with the state. We typically have all of the local data in our system. You know, it's all coming from DataTel. So we typically don't go to this in IR unless we want to get comparison data, and then with that, it's really robust. I don't think many other systems are able to get this level of information. Some other out tabs, faculty and staff. These are really basic reports that give just numbers of employees in different classifications, and then like average salaries. But these are actually, they just take you to, oh, well, this one doesn't. Oh, it does, yeah. It just takes you to a PDF. It's not, the data is not actually in the reporting system like the others is. So, and so we typically don't use that very much. So are there any questions that you have about MIS? It's,
Could you show us an example under students, for instance, well, under students, yeah, for something, not, for something that's disaggregated by ethnicity?
Sure.
Just to see what it looks like.
Sure. Would you rather an outcome or just?
How about enrollment status? I don't.
Okay, so now it's giving you a bunch of tabs here, because this is just for the first time students. Here, and yeah, I remember this was about a 12% Hispanic when 10 years ago when I started here. So that's and then it just continues. So that was the last category there, and then first time transfer students. And so then you just keep working your way through these tabs here. Special admit, that's high school students.
I just wanted to see kind of what the breakdown was that they were using, and and then of course how we look. It's and I guess just for some, I don't know, sociological interest, it would be, we would see such a different picture with colleges in other areas, especially urban areas, Southern California areas, and I think it would just point out to us the relatively lesser amount of diversity of our student body than in some other places, just for interest's sake.
I'm just going to go to Long Beach District, just So Long Beach
Wow.
is
Mhm.
66%.
66%
Mhm.
Hispanic.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're Hispanic serving.
Think so. Tracy has a question.
Yes,
Oh, just a comment. I believe, with the Hispanic community around here, there's so much more potential than what we're doing. So much more potential, and part of it is, changing their culture, but there's so much potential.
Is HSU, Spanish serving?
I believe, Angelina, you looked at that once for us.
We're not quite,
Yeah.
in terms of comparing our percentage of Hispanic to Humboldt or to the population?
oh, just if we would qualify to be a.
Oh, okay, or a Spanish serving, you have to have a certain percentage?
Mhm.
Didn't I hear that, in the public school system, not college, but up through high school, that in California, overall, more than half of the students are Hispanic?
55%.
55%? No, for the state as a whole.
And most of these students, obviously, they know English as well as the next person. I mean, it's about, for instance, getting in the service industry and, reaching out to them and, just for opportunity. I mean, there's just so much potential we're not doing in this county, and I know we can. I mean, I know of a lot of them, my kids' age, they hung around, they played ball together. I mean, it's untapped. We could do a lot better.
I do remember we added soccer, though, to our athletic program to help encourage, the Hispanic students to attend.
Any other questions, or?
Thanks for giving us
Yeah,
one
this
more tool
has
to
been
keep
fun,
moving.
yeah.
I think
Fun?
it's fun, but.
Yeah.
So, how does this, so there's a system called CalPass, but that is all educational levels, right?
Right, so it includes, CalPAS data from K-12, and, so here's CalPAS, and they created this launch board, and they keep making changes to it. I use CalPAS as a launch board, to try to get, wage data. It's one of the few places that I can get some wage data, although a lot of our programs, we don't have enough students for it to appear, but in some it does appear. They've got this pipeline, strong workforce. It started specific to career technical ed programs, is what it was for, and then they've opened it up. They've got guided pathways, so they have reports on momentum, tracking, we'll just do this. Oh, sorry, my computer just ran out of battery. But anyway, the launch board is, the reports are much more pre-formed. You're not really digging in there and selecting, disaggregating things themselves. It's already disaggregated for you, and there's just very specific reports that you can run. But it's I'll use that resource mostly for career technical outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And how often well, I guess we must, or not just us, but the system must take input semester by semester?
Yeah, we submit files. So what happens is our IT has pointed to different places in our, in DataTal that it knows what those data elements are. So we extract it each semester at different points. There's more than one semester of uploads, and then they run it to do the error check, and then we send out to different folks, business office, HR, admissions and records, special program. There's so many data files, and we've had a data owners group that meets for years now that goes over, why? Because a lot of times the errors aren't strictly within a program, so they're called referential checks. So it'll look at like some data from admissions and compare it to, what is showing up for that student in, say, EOPS or something, and it'll give errors that are across departments, so they have to work closely to figure out what is going on and how to clean it up, but I think they've done a really good job.
Are there any questions? Oh, I appreciate your showing it to us and to looking at a wealth of information that's available, which I assume gets used for specific reasons. We're not sitting there trying to study every chart for every option.
Yeah, it was, like, we relied on the data mart a bit when we were trying to figure out, comparing our amount of online to other colleges in the area, or our enrollment, trends to other colleges, that's where it's been pretty helpful.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the Saturday again. Okay, so we will move on to 1.7, discuss progress of selected board trustees' goals. This was brought up, and our goals are for 21-23. We redid them a fair amount when we redid these in 21. We can do this the way you want. We can just run through the list and comment if we have any concerns about progress being made or not being made, or specific thoughts that you had, of which I had one. Trustee Mallory?
Yeah, just a question.
Oh, it's on the
It's on the webpage.
the board homepage.
You mentioned President Matthews that this was brought up. What was the context in which it was brought up?
I believe that a trustee at one of the meetings said, have we looked at the board goals to see if we're making progress or not?
Okay.
And my memory is that it's Trustee Dorn, but
So it wasn't a specific goal or?
No,
Okay.
it was just, these are ongoing goals, we're in the middle.
Yeah.
It wasn't a question of should we revise, which we're not doing at the moment, but do we want to see if we feel that we're making progress?
Makes sense. Thank you.
Trustee Bigham?
I think I might have been one of those
Okay.
who mentioned the goals. We have so many goals, and rather than try to look at all of 12 of them, or however many it is at one time, if we could kind of piece them out and discuss them and see how we're doing, and then do, another meeting to just, I know there's a board, well, I don't know if the board evaluation committee, that's really not a part of their role, I don't think. I'm just wondering how do we stay on top of these very comprehensive goals that we've developed for the next 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
Like my opinion at the last workshop, we're making them more specific and measurable. So I won't add that again, but I think, I wonder if we don't really have a committee that focuses on these except for initial creation of them. We don't really have a committee that focuses on the regular monitoring of them.
Trustee Myers?
I would question whether a committee is needed to monitor these. It feels like it should be the board's responsibility to monitor these rather than setting aside 2 or 3 trustees as their responsibility.
But how would you recommend that we have discussions around it? Because I imagine to dive into any of these to measure them, it's more specific. And you're gonna have some trustees that have more of a desire to focus on others. They're gonna ask for different kinds of data. I could imagine it could be hard lift for administration to keep up with. What I was imagining was if there was a committee that was focused on 1 for this year, and the committee was focused on 2 for next year, or something like that, that it might be more manageable, but.
Trustee Kupini?
Yeah, some of the stuff, well, most of it's done through the board evaluation. We could have some of that, and obviously we do, some of the questions centered around these goals. But, yeah, I don't know how much, I don't know. It's kind of complicated. I mean, if we keep on getting into it, how deep do we want to go?
My comment, when I looked at them, and I was not looking at researching data on each one, I have to say, but when I read through them, I felt that I could point to examples on almost every single thing where I knew we were making progress. And that it was a continuing focus, whether it was through, especially the Education Master Plan, which encompasses quite a lot of these things, ongoing discussions, budget discussions. I just, again, not saying, okay, show me a chart for this semester or last semester and, how are we doing, but in terms of what I know is a focus and what I know is progress being made, the ones that I wasn't clear on were under number 2, where we talked about review and revision of board policies regarding DEI, and again under 4C, which talks again about especially board policies in terms of equity and inclusion. And I know at one time we were waiting for some, I think it was CCLC templates to come through, and we said we'll wait for those and then apply them. I know that recently there were a couple of policies that you brought to the board where wording focusing on that was included, and we passed those. But I'm not really sure if we ever, as a board, actually did look at those policies, especially the one in 2000 and 2000, which are our responsibility.
Can I respond?
Yes.
Jane Wright, who's the one who's prepared those templates, was at the October conference in the ACCT conference, and gave a presentation about these updates. And she said she sends them out, like she sent a set out in the fall, and she was going to send another set out to the district in the spring. So I'm assuming they're going to the president's office, and then the president's staff is taking them. They're dividing it up and working on them. That's my assumption.
Okay, because I was,
Every year we get a spring update and a fall update, and whoever owns that policy goes to that admin person, and they bring it back, and it goes through the process.
Okay.
College council, constituent review, and then back to college council, and to the board for a first read.
okay, and so that includes template changes, a variety of things, including diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes,
Okay.
any legal update also.
Okay, so we can say that, that to the extent there have been officially recommended changes being made, that we're getting those and we're making them.
Correct.
Okay. So do we want to call that good, which is we're following guidelines, doing what we're supposed to, or do we want to look at our 1,000 and 2,000 ourselves for that beyond? Would it be appropriate beyond what the CCLC guidelines say? We wanted to make changes specifically regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I think our responsibility is just that, knowing that these templates come out in the fall and spring, to have, to know that they're being processed. Not
Okay.
that we have to personally process them, but
Okay.
they'll get to us eventually.
Yes.
Okay.
But we just need to know that they're not just put in a file somewhere
Right.
and not.
Well, I didn't
follow
think that,
up.
yeah, okay.
No, I know you didn't think
Yeah.
that, but, in the past, that could have happened.
Okay, okay. Well, I just wanted to be sure that that's happening.
Yep, it is.
Trustee Mallory?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going back to Trustee Kelly's suggestion regarding the committee. And I do agree, Trustee Kelly, that, we should have a way of monitoring ourselves by a committee or somebody means. And I'm wondering if we should consider making a review of our goals part of our regular calendar, something that we could do quarterly or every 4 months, once a year. And, we wouldn't have to spend a lot of time on them at whatever spacing we decide might be appropriate, but they would be in our face. Their comment or not comment, but we would be looking at them with some regularity.
So we have 11. If we did it quarterly, that would be 3 and 1 quarter when there was 2. And we could literally go the first 3, the second 3, if we were inclined to organize it that way. Is that kind of what you're,
Yeah, actually, I was thinking about looking at the whole set.
each time?
And saying,
Okay.
hey, I think we, might want to revisit number 4 or number 8 or, wherever we feel we may need to put an emphasis or focus.
Okay.
But,
I kind of like your idea in that it would put all of this in front of us to pick where we had a concern, an interest, a question, as opposed to waiting a year to look at 2 or 3 on the list. So I think,
also remind our constituents,
right,
of what we have told ourselves we think is
right. So we wouldn't be looking, because our revision is every 2 years, we would be looking at reviewing
just
for information, concern, focus.
just one thought.
No, I prefer your idea to mine about looking at the whole list. Trustee Capini?
Would that, come with like reviewing data from IR? They play a part in this, right? I mean, on some of the goals. How would that look like?
Well, I think that's up to what the board wants to ask and what is a reasonable request.
Yeah,
in terms-
we want to be,
Right.
reasonable. I'm just trying to figure out
Yeah.
how it looks like, what this would look like.
Could that come in, and I obviously I thought this all the way through. I mean, this is just kind of come up based on what Trustee Kelly was suggesting. I could envision, having a whole list in front of us every 3 or 4 months. Geez,
No,
we're not making much progress in number 6. And with the President Flamer's approval, he may say, could we look into this? Could you have your staff report back to us so that we could make progress on this, or what do we need to do? I mean, I certainly would not envision this as something that we would just lay on staff every 3 or 4 months, I think.
It'll help us figure out goal setting.
And if you read the goals, I mean, a lot of them are like, how do we measure? We count how many times it was on our agenda, we count how many times we voted yes for a thing, you know, I don't know, I think that's what leads us to our self-evaluation surveys, and that's our tracker for how we feel it's done. But from my perspective, it feels like very gut-driven, and our own memories about, you know, how recently did we hear about a program.
Well, I think also that, to me, part of it is that because we aren't responsible for making this happen. We're responsible for tracking that they are. You know, and so in a lot of cases, in the course of our business, to know that in fact, yes, they are, that means we are meeting our responsibility for knowing that, because it's not something that we are directly doing. I mean, but I think if we on a quarterly basis looked at them, if we do our due diligence and ahead of the meeting look at things that we have a question or a concern about, and then in the course of that discussion identify something that we really aren't clear on, that we want to know more about, that we're unsure where we are, and could ask President Flamer for appropriate information to answer that question. And that could be on the agenda for the next meeting to just get the feedback. Yes, because we don't, we want it to be, as usual, follow that reasonable request aspect.
I think it's a great idea. It may not happen within 30 days. It depends on what the request would be. And what I think that we'll have to do is agree on how do you measure, for example, goal 1, where it says to promote student success. How do we measure how the board is going to promote? So what kind of data would the board, I can see Trustee Kelly, right? And so what type of information does the board need to evaluate itself against each and every goal? I think being very, very specific with me would be very helpful. But it is doable.
Right, because again, it does look at how are we satisfied with saying we're meeting the goal, and is there always a data report that we need, or are we satisfied through our own meetings and discussions and information from however many sources that yes, this is happening. But so if we want to make a quarterly calendar, we would, if we did March, that would be the end of the first quarter, and every 3 months, that would put us December with the last one.
If I may, just to come back to the committee idea, it seems like a fair bit of work in trying to identify how to measure those things. And I imagine that the people who are going to have those conversations is going to be the executive board, the president and vice president who are meeting with President Flamer to set agendas that will be doing most of the kind of deciding what kind of information do we need to discuss these goals. Whereas if we had a committee that was willing to do the work, that committee could work with the president, whoever else he recommends, to identify those areas of information to bring back to the board for those quarterly goal discussions. But that's why I brought it up. I don't mean to keep staying there. That'll be the last I mention it, but.
No, but you're talking about having information already selected and provided at the time that we talk about them at the quarter, and there's 11 goals. Whereas we were talking about the idea of identifying in our quarterly discussion some area of concern or interest or needed follow-up, which we would then ask for some data about, and there is a big difference. Because I don't see how we could be looking for every quarter a data report on each of these goals.
No, and my idea was that we would focus on specific goals each quarter.
Got it. Trustee Biggin?
Well, one thought I had, if we're going to use number one as an example, when we do have that discussion, we could report out, you know, what we have observed that has happened in the last quarter that supports this goal.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, this last part of the goal were to influence state and federal legislation that will have a significant impact on the district. And we would acknowledge that we have a very viable advocacy committee who has worked with the president to, submit letters and, just kind of remind ourselves what we've done in the last quarter and, go through it that way.
Right. That's kind of what I have in mind too, because we know, like with number one, we know what has been happening. We know the meetings that the president has had with the legislators. We know what the committee has done. We know monthly what's happening with the fiscal health and what we're working on in terms of policy change and everything else. So I see it.
Quick reminder of
Right.
We are on track.
And is there something that we're concerned about? The other thing about dividing them up again, Trustee Kelly, is that then that means we're only looking at one once a year, because each quarter we would choose several. So that means in a year's time we're only looking at each goal once. And
I like the idea of all of them at the same time.
Trustee Capini?
Well, when we're talking about data, for instance, student success, if we're gonna look at that goal, we have a board calendar when those reports come up. I mean, we wanna streamline this for efficiency. We have multiple reports throughout the year, and what I'm trying to say.
Student success data is on our agenda every meeting.
Yeah.
So we.
But if we could look at the board calendar, the different reports, maybe I get it, and I'm supportive, but I don't want it to become this big albatross for everyone either.
So, President Flamer.
Yeah, Officer. So it sounds as though on a monthly basis, or either bi-monthly, or how often the board wants to do this, is that the board will look at all its 11 goals and probably agree that you are meeting the goals, but to what degree are you meeting them is the question.
Or do we have specific questions,
Right.
or something that doesn't come up so much regularly at our meeting that we aren't quite sure what's happening with it?
Right.
Okay, so then, so let's propose then that we are reviewing the list as a whole. Quarterly would be every 3 months. I'm proposing that we can say every 2 months. I don't think we should do it any less than every 3 months.
They have a nice line too.
Okay. Okay. So the end of a first quarter would be March. So let's put it on the March agenda with the whole list. And what I would encourage you to do for that meeting is to look and see if you have specific goals that you can't say, yes, I think we're meeting this, I can demonstrate, I know when we've covered this, who's doing it, what's happening, so that we can assure ourselves that we are familiar familiar, if you want to say, that we are aware for each of our goals, what we believe is happening, that we can say, yes, we're working towards that goal. Okay,
I was going to say, some of these goals are going to be, could be influenced by legislation or
of course.
decisions that are made in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
And then that will modify our expectations of
Mhm.
how we're meeting the goal. I'm thinking, for example, in 3E, you can talk about the hold harmless option. You know, now they're talking about making, was it 24, 25, you know, it's going to be our
It's
big
moving
year.
out.
Yeah, and so, you know,
Mhm.
the fiscal cliff isn't such
Mhm.
a threat right now,
Mhm.
but again, that's based on legislation and
Right.
decisions that are outside of our.
Right. But we can be sure that we know where that target is moving or whatever, you know, wherever it's happening. Okay, are we reasonably satisfied, Trustee Kelly?
No, it's fine, it's fine. It follows along with the nature of what we do here. I mean, we're not supposed to be in the weeds. And, you know, we tried very hard to make sure our goals were focused on what the board actually has their locus of control for instead of in the weeds. So,
Okay.
you know, my only hesitation would be making sure we're not pulling too much data from the institution that doesn't support the removed goals that we kind of have.
Right.
Well, you know, I mean, some of these, it's like, how many times have we agendized it? How many presentations have we had? We were gonna go silly and specific, so I'm with my colleagues, I think it's a gray area, and we just have to do our best to kind of keep track of it ourselves throughout the year and bring this stuff up in public session.
Right.
Or privately with Dr.
Yeah.
Flamer in questions.
And we will count on you, President Flamer, to keep our requests for some information reasonable.
So far it has been.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our agenda. Yes, in addition with the time for lunch. So I appreciate that and your assistance with the agenda, President
You're
Flamer.
welcome.
And thank you for a Saturday and lunch.
Yes. Did everybody sign the card?
Yes, right here.
And with that,
Or at least I think everybody did.
Yeah.
our meeting